So good afternoon to everyone. There's quite a few people joining up, so I'll probably just start with the housekeeping. I will be putting everybody on mute by default, and the Q&As will manage towards the end. So I'll probably give 2 or 3 minutes for people to join in, but then we'll kick on, as it's going to be recorded and we'll circulate around to everybody pretty soon after the webinar is finished. So welcome everybody. I'm going to kick off on the webinar. So I've allowed the few minutes and I'll kick away. So I'm going to give just a brief overview of the agenda, and then we'll get straight in. So I suppose the objective of today is to give all of the AuxiliaGroup associates an overview of all things sustainability and ESG, and probably provide some context as to why it's become such a high-profile issue. We're very grateful to have our speakers and for their expertise and support. So in terms of introductions, my name is JP Kennedy, or John Peter Kennedy for long. I'm head of business development with the guys here in the AuxiliaGroup, and I lead out the sustainability side of things. Chloe Healy is team lead for B Lab Ireland, so she's a passionate sustainability expert and is going to give us an overview of the journey. And then we've got Ingrid Donker, who is head of innovation and development with Future Planet. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to ask everybody to post any questions, queries, or comments using the chat function within Teams. And at the end of this webinar, we'll then try and facilitate answering those questions. And if we run into time constraints, we'll then put a summary of the questions and answers and circulate on the back of a copy of the video recording of this webinar. So in terms of sustainability, we're going to give just a brief overview. Chloe will talk about the wider sustainability journey using the B Corp journey over the last 20 odd years. Ingrid will then probably focus more on the CSRD and ESRS and all these acronyms which now come out of the now legal framework coming out of Europe, which I suppose in essence is trying to shape how companies now deliver on their sustainability commitments. Once those presentations are over, I'll give a brief summary of the companies that are in scope for the new legislations, those that are going to come into scope, and then critically the supply chain, which are typically the SMEs in most European countries that may not be in scope, but probably will be under the microscope. Hopefully an opportunity for some Q&A. And then I have a little bit of business development update for all of the Auxilia Group associates at the end. So in terms of what does sustainability mean? So just a broad brushstroke is really, I suppose, the company's strategy towards reducing adverse environmental impacts and to reduce social impacts. normally addressing two areas, what impact or what effect the business has on the environment and what effect the business has on society. And I suppose if we're all in this room together and we're not really understanding the reasons that are driving this relentless focus on sustainability, perhaps we shouldn't be in the same room, because the climate issue is definitely a real issue we need to grapple with. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Chloe, who will give an overview of the wider. I will cease, I'll stop sharing. Chloe will share and hopefully explain that wider context. Chloe, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, JP. So let me share my screen. Great. So let me know, are we all good? Awesome. So yeah, thank you so much, first of all, JP, for the warm welcome. As mentioned, I'm Chloe and I'm the team lead at B Lab Ireland, and I'm delighted to be speaking to you all this afternoon about the B Corp movement. So over the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to share, first of all, what the B Corp movement is all about. Then I will speak to the B Corp certification roadmap, discuss some of the business benefits to certification, and then also touch on some information that we have about state funding support that's actually available for Irish companies that are pursuing certification. So moving into the B Corp movement. So what is it all about? Essentially, the B Corp movement is a global movement of people using business as a force for good. In 2024, the movement is in demand like never before. And this is simply because business, as usual, isn't working, and there is widespread demand for change. So shifting business models. Businesses that are run with the primary purpose of creating value for shareholders are exclusive, for the short term, and extractive. At B Lab, our model for business is one of stakeholder value, which is inclusive, for the long term, and regenerative, where the interests of stakeholders are considered alongside shareholders. And in this case, your stakeholders are the environment and all of the people connected to your business. At B Lab, we are on a mission to change our economic system to benefit all stakeholders, and we also certify companies known as B Corps who are leading the way. Put simply, stakeholder governance ensures businesses are accountable to people and planet, as well as shareholders. Now, moving on to B Corps. So B Corps are essentially companies that are verified to meet high standards of social and environmental performance, transparency, and accountability. These are companies that are managing to remain profitable while also looking after the interests of their stakeholders, living proof that the model of business stakeholder governance works. Now you'll see on the left here, these are many large companies who are B Corps. Collectively, there are now over 8,600 B Corps, employing over 790,000 people across 98 countries, and all with one unifying goal: to create an economic system that benefits all people and the planet. Now taking a look at the growth of the movement over the last 17 plus years. On the left, you can see the different global regions that B Lab has partners in, and within each of these regions, there is large communities of B Corps. The B Corp movement has grown exponentially, particularly in the last few years, and most notably in the UK. So at the start of this year, actually, in Q1 2024, the UK celebrated a very exciting milestone of reaching 2,000 B Corps in their community. And naturally, due to the relationship between Ireland and the UK, particularly in terms of business, we're seeing that the growth in the UK is also positively impacting the growth of the movement in Ireland. So now taking a minute to look actually at the growth of the movement in Ireland. During 2023, our community grew by 150% to 33 B Corps. And in 2024, it's projected to more than double in size again, making Ireland one of the fastest growing B Corp communities in the world. At present, in Ireland, we currently have 42 B Corps, and many more who also have operations in Ireland. So you can see some of the B Corps here in the various logos. The community is continuing to grow all the time, and there's many more Irish companies who are currently being assessed by B-Lab for certification. Now, B-Lab Ireland, which I work for, is a very small and new team that was just established last November. We're focused on growing the Irish B Corp community by supporting companies pursuing certification, facilitating B Corp engagement and collaboration opportunities, and also training B leaders. So B leaders are essentially sustainability consultants that have been trained by B-Lab to guide companies through the B impact assessment and B Corp certification process. And this past February, we also had the pleasure of training more of the AuxiliaGroup to become B leaders. Now moving on to B Corp certification, and what does the journey actually look like to becoming a B Corp? First, I want to share a little bit about what makes B Corps unique. Number one, comprehensive impact analysis. The B impact assessment tool doesn't focus on one product or service, but rather the business as a whole. Secondly, the mission lock. B Corps are legally required to consider the impact of their decisions on all stakeholders. Number three, part of a global movement. So the global movement that I touched on at the start is a movement of businesses that are essentially supporting one another to improve and drive global change. And fourthly, continuous improvement. So certified B Corps must update their impact assessment and verify their impact score every 3 years. And this process is known as recertification. Now, who is eligible for certification? Firstly, you need to be a for-profit company, and you can be one of any size. So from a small SME to a large multinational company, and you can be operating in many locations across the world. And finally, and maybe most importantly, you must be in operations for at least 1 year. The main reason for this is that when you are completing the assessment, there is a number of questions going to ask you to provide answers based on the previous fiscal year. Therefore, it's important that you have actually been in operations for at least 1 fiscal year. Now moving on to the steps to certifying. There's essentially 2 things that a B Corp needs to do. First, you must pass the assessment. So this is referring to the B impact assessment. All B Corps must achieve a verified score of at least 80 points. And again, this assessment is assessing the impact of your entire company's operations. Number 2, you must make the legal change. So B Corps actually amend their constitution or governing documents, committing to consider the impact of their decisions, not just on shareholders, but on all of their stakeholders. Now let's take a little bit of a look at actually what is the B impact assessment. It is a free and confidential online tool that helps companies to measure and improve their impact across 5 key areas. And you can see them on the right here: workers, environment, customers, community, and governance. Within the assessment, companies are going to answer multiple choice style questions in each of these impact areas. And the next slide, I actually have an example of a question you're asked in the BIA. So this one is from the worker section, and it is asking what percentage of your employees are paid at least a living wage. Depending on your answer, you're going to get more or less points. Now, just a note to say here, you don't necessarily have to be paying a living wage to become a B Corp to each of your employees, as we absolutely recognize it's not always possible in some industries yet. However, if you are providing a living wage to employees, you will gain more points here. Now, just want to briefly touch on the costs associated with becoming a B Corp. So companies pay an annual certification fee, and this is based on their annual turnover. These fee bands are in place to ensure B Corp certification is affordable for all companies. In addition to annual certification fees, when you are pursuing certification for the first time and going through the review process, there are a couple of costs associated here as well. So we would just ask that you please refer to B Lab Europe's website for more of the most up-to-date information on these. Next, moving on to the business benefits of certification. So why should you actually consider pursuing B Corp certification for your company? The first one here is future-proofing your business. So B Corp certification is going to help you to prepare for upcoming EU sustainability legislation. Irish companies that right now are using our tool to measure and improve their impact year over year feel better equipped to meet new regulations, including CSRD. Some of the larger B Corps in Ireland who have, I'm sure you can imagine, hundreds and tens of hundreds of suppliers are actually using the B Corp framework to support their supply chain and starting to develop simple ESG strategies. Also, these smaller SMEs are going to need to provide that information for the larger companies that are in scope for CSRD and other legislation. So it's very helpful for them to manage all of the data that they need to report on, but then also to provide a first step essentially for these smaller companies to get started. Secondly, employee retention. So B Corps in general experience greater levels of employee retention and engagement. In the UK, there was a study done in 2021, and it showed that B Corps had an average employee attrition rate of 8%. And this was compared to 16 to 20% for the wider UK business population. It's something that, of course, takes time to report when you become a B Corp to see how it's impacting your retention, but it is a positive trend that we're noticing amongst all of the surveys that are done for B Corps. Next, simplify sustainability. So as I'm sure many of you know on this call, there can be so many challenges related to business today related to supply chain issues, rising energy costs. And so if you're looking for a really simple framework to help you define and guide your sustainability strategy, B Corp really is that. And it's something that companies of all sizes and sectors can use to develop an easy to follow ESG strategy using our B Impact Assessment tool. And that's something, again, as I mentioned, that tool is free. So even if you don't decide to pursue certification, you can still use that tool to help you report and improve your impact year over year. Another business benefit of B Corp certification is the global recognition. So this certification is recognized and trusted by consumers globally. While the B Corp movement is relatively new to Ireland, a recent study in 2023 showed that in the UK, B Corp awareness is now at 38%. And again, given our close relationship with the UK, we are seeing that trend is positively impacting the growth of the movement here in Ireland and also the consumer awareness of what B Corp is. People actively are searching for the B Corp logo on products when deciding which is the best one for them to buy. Next, revenue growth. So there's often a misconception that B Corps are not profitable and that considering your stakeholders will hurt your bottom line. But actually, this is not the case. In 2022, a study across Europe found that B Corps have an average annual revenue growth rate of 22%. And finally, winning investment. So B Corp certification gives investors a lot of confidence in the environmental and social credentials of companies that they are investing in. And in Irish context, B Corp's Strong Roots and Urban Volt are two examples of companies that have both received substantial investments in certifying. Finally, I want to touch on some of the state funding that's actually available in Ireland to support companies pursuing certification. The first one being Green Start. So Green Start is a consultancy grant that Enterprise Ireland, Leo, and IDA Ireland companies can access to hire an experienced external consultant, such as a B leader, to help deliver B Corp certification. This is a grant that I believe companies can actually access for a few different projects, and the grant rate is up to 80% of eligible costs, up to a maximum grant total of 5,000. So this grant is something that is available for a lot of companies in Ireland, and most of the time it's just that information is hard to find. But once they are aware of it, we actually have our own Irish Bee Leader database that's growing year over year that we can point companies towards if they want to work with a consultant that really has that extra training in how to use our tool and to understand the whole certification process itself. And finally, there is another grant called the Green Plus, and it's usually a grant that larger enterprises are going to apply for. So it's a consultancy grant, again, that EI and IDA Ireland companies can access to hire an external consultancy agency to help deliver B Corp certification. They can also use this funding towards employee time. So essentially, in a larger enterprise, given the size of the change project that they're engaging in, they may need to actually assign a team member full-time to that project. So this grant can help to actually pay for that as well. And the grant rate is up to 50% of eligible costs, up to a maximum grant of 50,000. And I'm going to end there for the moment. Thank you all for your time. If you have any questions, as JP said, you can pop them in the chat. And if there's time at the end, I'm more than happy to answer any of them. And then following on from this as well, if you have any deeper questions or in the future, you can always email us at ireland@bcorporation.eu. Thank you.
Chloe, thanks a million for that, and very informative, and thank you so much. So I suppose the B Corp is more an overreaching concept for companies and how they address the sustainability. I'm going to introduce Ingrid now, who will have probably a more focus on the CSRD and ESRS frameworks, which are now the legal priority for a number of larger companies. And Ingrid will kind of try to address all of the various acronyms that are used to try and explain what in effect is probably one of the most transformative changes to EU businesses. I wouldn't say ever, but probably close to it. And I think a lot of companies are only now just beginning to recognize the significance. So Ingrid, I shall cease and desist and hand over to you.
Thank you so much, JP, and thank you, Chloe. It was very informative. I know the B Corp, and especially from even other. One second, I'm just moving on from other countries even before you were here in Ireland. So I'm delighted you're in Ireland. Everybody, it's a very insightful, I suppose, voluntary standard. The reason why I'm here, and JP, you're setting me up for a fall, because I will never, within the next 20 minutes, be able to explain all the acronyms, and I can only give an oversight of how we have thought about it. And if anybody wants any further information, I'm always available afterwards for a call or a chat or anything else. But I just wanted to come on here and share with you how we have thought about it. So this is Donald's son. He's my co-founder, and he asked his father about 4 years ago, Dad, will the planet still be okay when I'm your age? There's a 42-year gap between the two, and Donald had retired. He was going to play golf for the rest of his life until Christian asked the question. And so he said, I have a bigger problem that I need to focus on. So we did that. We went sitting on the beach, because we believe that the planet is our customer, or at least one of our main customers anyway. So we looked at all the standards like B Corp, like GRI. I'm a GRI certified professional, like UNEP FI, the SDGs, any report that came out of the UN, any report that came out of OECD, Europe. And we took ourselves off the grid for 6 months, and we deep dive into the problem or opportunity that is sustainability. And we came away with the knowledge of, God, this is so complex, this is so broad, the scope is wide. No wonder companies just get get paralyzed by the thought of it. So we decided to break the big elephant down in small little pieces, and we said we know what business, how business operate. I've been in supply chain and procurement for the last 30 years in different organizations, different sector. Donal had 5 successful digital transformation companies. We come at it from a different angle, and our shared question and aim was, how can we simplify this big sustainability complex question for companies who want to do better? So we developed a software platform, and we're using AI as much as we can, not to take over, but to inform us, to make it efficient, and to help shape sustainability strategy, as Chloe said, implement also the transition plans, because a huge focus on where you are now and where you're going to go, manage the ESG data that legislation requires you to report on, and then automate that, because we believe the report should be an outcome of everything you've collected and have done. It shouldn't be a huge task to compile all of this. So we're using automation a lot to support companies to be compliant with CSRD and other legislation. So, and I'm going to whisk through the slides, but I want you to show how we actually thought about when we understood when CSRD came about. One final thing, we live and we try to embed the 7th generation principle, which is an old Iroquois Indian principle, which says that the decisions we make today should be beneficial and contributing to the welfare of 7 generations forth. So with everything we decide today, it should also benefit our grandchildren. And we know that's not happening. We know that the current business, the current political system is completely divorced of that principle. So it's the long-term view. When we make decisions, it needs to be good for people, good for planet, and good for the company itself, obviously. So with that, let's just dive into CSRD. And again, as I said, I'm going fast because I have a few slides to get through, but the majority are more the way we have thought about making it simpler for companies. Because when you are a consultant and you are with your customer, you should listen out for questions or concerns around there's this new legislation coming out, or do you know anything about CSRD? Have you heard about double materiality assessment? Do you know what it means, a sustainability statement? So all of that relates to the CSRD. And the CSRD is nothing new, but the EU, under the Green Deal, and you might have heard of the Green Deal, has put together a whole package of legal regulatory directives that is going to be applied across Europe, or also beyond Europe. Any company that trades into Europe with more than 150 million of turnover will need to comply. So we're looking at the CSRD, where we have ESRS up high. You can see ESRS EFRAG, the taxonomy. That's all around reporting. So today we're talking about reporting. And then we have the CSDDD, which is the triple D. It was approved last month. With that, it's all about the due diligence. We have the Green Claims Directive, we have the raw critical, the critical material directives, and so forth. A lot of other mandatory things that's coming out. On the other hand, then we already had the SFDR, which is the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, which is the accounting directive for banks. So all in all, to say, this is part of a bigger EU legal package that is going to hit us, smack us in the face if we don't get ourselves ready. So we need to be prepared. CSRD, in simple terms, really what it tries to aim, what it tries to do is actually eliminate greenwashing. It is actually saying to companies, we actually don't care where you are. on the journey of either if you're a B Corp or not, what you have in place. But you need to, against these standards, and the standards are called ESRS, with a specific focus on a challenge, either a climate or a social or a people's challenge. But you need to be transparent where you currently are. You need to show us where you want to go, and then how you're going to report. So eliminating greenwashing. We're not interested anymore in fancy, good-looking sustainability report. And if you say something in your financial report and it's not representing what you're saying in your sustainability report, you're greenwashing. So ultimately, it's going to be incorporated. Ultimately, a company needs to make decisions based on sustainable data, but for the better good, the financial growth of the organization. And so here, again, a quick preview of the 12 standards. You will see ESRS 1, ESRS 2, up high. They are mandatory. So all companies that are within scope, and JP will tell it in a minute, which companies are in scope, they will have to report against 156 ESRS 2. The ESRS 1 are general requirements, it's more definition and all of that. And then based on a document, which I'll explain in a minute, that determines what your main focuses are to improve your negative impact. That will point to either one of the 5 environmental standards that you will see in green. So everything in the banner of E, we have ESRS 1, which is climate change with the big greenhouse gas and energy focus, the E2, which is pollution, the E3, water and marine, the E4, biodiversity, the E5, the circular economy. Or if, when you have done the double materiality assessment, it says, no, we have a huge impact on our people, which is the S banner. There's 4 standards. And if it's deemed material, then you need to report against the 199 disclosure requirements on your own workforce, S1, the workers in your value chain, S2. Again, the scope is not only your organization, but also your supply chain and your customers. So it's the full, the full brief, the full scope of your full supply chain. The affected communities, so where your operations are in the society, where they're affecting communities, and then lastly, but definitely not least, the consumer and the end users. Finally, it sits on the G standard. There's only one, and it's around business conduct. But obviously, we have corporate culture, protection of whistleblowers, supplier relationship management. So it's all about procurement here, political engagement, and animal welfare, corruption. And it's all about be transparent. Where are you now? What have you in place? What are you doing? What are your impacts, risks, and opportunities? And if you have risks, how are you going to mitigate them? If you have opportunities, how are you going to strengthen them? So 12 standards, 2 mandatory, 10 to be reported against if they are deemed material. And then we sat back and we said, okay, if you're a sustainability officer or a finance director or even a CEO, what are the things you already are dealing with at the moment? So we have changing regulatory landscape. There's a need for an ESG strategy. There's so much data that needs to be collected, and it comes from all different angles. How do we calculate our emissions? How do we report, baseline and gap analysis, and so forth? And what we found was that the traditional solutions, working on an Excel, doing training in the normal way, having manuals, reading up about it, that's not going to cut it anymore. It's not enough, because ultimately we have to also, one of the things that the CSRD is saying, we need to upload it onto an EU platform. So ultimately it needs to be digitally tagged into an XBRL format. So it needs to be online. So there's a solution gap at the moment, not only a solution gap or an awareness and a knowledge gap around the data, but also a solution gap in relation to how can we be efficient? How can we do this? And do we have the knowledge? And do we have the tools? And so that's why we went to work, because everything that we've already heard today from Chloe as well. I'm not going to stop on this because we all know this is very relevant. But how are we going to help companies to do this better? So I'm going to just go through the 4 different steps that we have thought about it to help companies to embed sustainability. And so it is about your sustainability strategy. And it is based on double materiality assessment. Double materiality assessment is a must do. All companies need to do it, all companies who are within scope of the CSRD. And so once we know what material topics are important to us for our organization, then we need to find out, well, what are then the data points, either the numerics or the narratives that we need to collect? Because there's no point doing more than what we need to report on, but at the same time, it needs to be all linked in and it's all interconnected. From the moment we know the data and the data source and we've linked it all up and we're gathering that information, how actually are we going to improve? Because just measuring data isn't good enough anymore. Like a report is just a report, it's a snapshot. What is very important to understand, not only under CSRD, but also CSDDD, which is the other directive, is that Europe wants to see how you're going to improve. What is your action plan? What are your targets? If you have targets, how are you going to measure? What are your metrics? So they want to see, they want to understand how you as an organization are embedding sustainability for the full ESG topics. And we have then decided, we said, okay, this is all very, big and complex. So therefore, the sustainability statement, which is a sustainable, is the ESG report, it should just be a button away from all the work you've done before. We've gathered our double materiality assessment. We've done all of that. We've done our data configuration. We've done our gap analysis. We know what we need to get to. Now we have put in plans in place internally with our suppliers to improve. So therefore, we have everything. All the inputs are there to do a compliant sustainability report. So that's what I'm going to quickly show you. So we developed a technology, a platform to embed as much knowledge, and so we're never finished because there's so much more knowledge coming out. But what we've done is we build an architecture that guides companies to know what they need to do when they need to do it. And it doesn't matter where they are or where they start, because we all start differently and there's always different elements that are more important to us than others. But at the same time, there is one big framework, which is CSRD or CSDDD, or if you're in the States, it's the ISSB with the IFRS. And so what does that mean? It's always going to be the same. So we said if it's always the same, then we can make it available on the platform and we infuse it with knowledge. So we do that for the sustainable strategy, the ESG data, the transformation, and the sustainability statement. And how have we done it? So we looked first, what are the critical success criteria? Obviously, we need to do a double materiality assessment, so we're compliant. And because of there's a sector preview already existing, it's nearly like when you buy something on Amazon, it actually, or even Google, it tells you you've bought this now, and others who look like you also considered this and this and this and this. So we have infused our platform with more than 40,000 different data points of different sectors to say, you're a company in this sector and other companies in this sector who look like you are reporting on this, this, and this. So rather than wasting 4 or 5 weeks time in reading all about your competition, about a different sector, we've infused all of that, and we've used the SDGs, we've used SASB, we've used GRI, we've used UNEP FI, we've used Encore, all different frameworks around the world to say, so what are you saying about this sector? What is important in that sector? And we've converged all of that into the platform, so it's only a click away. So we've automated that. We've also present the stakeholder mapping, the impact and financial materiality assessment, and I'm not going to go through it because that's a webinar in its own right, and the impact, risks and opportunities, the IRO, always comes back to ultimately then understand what material topic, is it water, is it waste, is it my own workforce at that level or at the level below, is important to me, so that I focus my resources, my time and energy on improving that. And so I'm not going to focus on this, but you will see for every solution that we've built, I have an output slide and I have an input slide. So we've infused the knowledge and data coming from all these different frameworks. I'm not going to go through it. Needless to say that I'm happy to show everything on another day, but ultimately, we believe that if we gather as much publicly available information, and this is all publicly available information, and we structure it in a way that it's really, really valuable to your company in your sector for that topic, then we're a step ahead and we're accelerating the knowledge and the thinking, and we're giving information when you need it. So once we did that, this is just a preview and I'm not going to stay too long, but so when you see the sector preview, we're giving you a long list of potential identified ESRS references. So E1, climate change mitigation, which is the greenhouse gases. If you're a company in construction, for example, this is the long list of, these are the topics you might consider under the E standards, under the S standards, and under the G standards. And we've mapped it to CSRD language so that there's and CSRD is really, it's clear, but it's not clear, but it's defined. So we'll always go back to the text so that we drive compliance. So when you get an instant sector preview of the long list, then you're going to make sure that you're doing your stakeholder management. So who needs to give you their perspective? Who is important to your business from a financial perspective? Who's going to improve your business, and who is going to be impacted by your business? So therefore, once we've done that, we then further engage from a scale, scope, irremediability, likelihood point of view into a financial perspective. We gather that from all the different stakeholders. And again, this is all embedded online to then ultimately come out with your materiality map, which is insight driven, which is validated by your stakeholder group, and it can be it's very agile to change it. We then know that, well, our own workforce is important. The value chain working conditions is important. So what then are the ESG data points that we need to collect? And that's our next step. So the ESG data configuration is the next step. From the moment we know these are our top 4 or 5 focus areas, what do we need to report on? So we've mapped that right the way through. And so we do an aggregated ESG data acquisition. You can upload it, you can manually key it in. There's a REST API, there's a multi-user permission. And very importantly, the scope 3 GHG, we can also enable suppliers to put their data online. Again, what data did we look at? So all these different data points and information were gathered to then say, okay, if we know if, for example, and we're talking here about the E1 climate change mitigation, if we know we need to report against E1 or E1-4, the GHG, E1-5, energy, then we also know category 3 and category 4. So we've built that whole architecture of ESRS data that is required. It sits on the platform, so you don't have to know. We'll just click on and off what is relevant to you, so you'll only see on screen what you need to report against. And this is for the numeric and the narrative, which is really, really important. So here we'll just see, okay, what are the ESRS standards that are important to us? Here you see category 2, 3, 4, and we click on and click off what you want to report on, what you need to report on, to then either manually enter your data or upload the file or API it in. We have pre-populated the text, and there's about 700 different text requirements. So we've pre-populated that to say, if you need to report against this, then they're asking you for this. So you can amend it online to your own context. Then we're going quickly into the ESG transformation, and please shut me down when I'm going over time. So the transformation really are the action plans. And so when we know that it's important to improve, we first need to know what our baseline is. So again, these are our success criteria. What's our gap to good, to then get automated transition plans. The data points, again, I'm not going to stay with this, but ultimately what we mean with journeys or transformations is assess yourself first where you are. So we do a gap and maturity analysis. It's online, it's on a specific topic. Here you'll see a scope 3 topic, and you just answer questions. When you do answer questions, you get your gap analysis report, and then it automatically builds a transition plan based on your own maturity. So if you're low maturity, high maturity, you're going to get different action plans. You can invite your whole team online. You then divide the actions to all collaborate to the target to improve maybe your greenhouse gases by 2030 by 57%. And then finally, you already know what's coming. If you have done all of that hard work, then we say it should be only one button away to build your CSRD report, because we know what was important to us. We've gathered all the data and we've entered it in, and we have our transition plans in place, and they might well have 5 to 10 year lifespans, but they're en route. We have our progress, and we can check our progress. And so what have we combined here? We know that the XBRL hasn't been finalized yet to report on, but we're collaborating with EFRAG and open source partners to make sure that our platform also, whatever you put in, is also enabled to go on XBRL and to be uploaded onto the EU ESMA website. So this is just a screenshot of what it currently looks like. You can download it as a report, and up high you'll see show my CO2 number. So these numbers can automatically convert it into CO2 against your specific sites. And yeah, we've enabled it for tagging. And so with that, when customers ask you, do you know anything about CSRD? Do you know, you can say, well, I do. And we're working with specialists who know a bit more. So listen out for the challenges that they have, because it's a challenge that's coming to everybody. And so we're here just to show how we thought about it, how we enable companies, but also consultants across the world to accelerate our journey to do better. So with that, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to thank you all.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. I'm always amazed at the amount of information you can retain. I hope for all of the associates watching live or later on, it is quite an intense, quite a transformative process. So it is ideally suited for a lot of experienced consultants who operate across all the business process. What I would like to do now is maybe just maybe more at a very top level, give a sense of the companies that are now going to move into the scope. So the legislation kicked in this year, and it means that in 2024, the extra large companies, typically those with a turnover of $500 million or more, or who are currently reporting for NFRD standards. So those companies are now collating information and data throughout this year, 2024, and they legally have to produce a CSRD compliant report as part of their financial reporting in 2025. So that's a handful of companies. The next big chunk will be the real impact on Irish businesses and most companies in Europe. So large companies that have a turnover greater than 50 million euro and have an employee base of 250 more, or an asset base of 25 million, they will be coming to scope next year, which means that they will need to collate their data for 2025, and then they will have to report in 2026. And then the final element will be listed EU companies, and that's a small threshold, but then a small number where the turnover is 8 million and 50 plus employees. There aren't that many SMEs in an Irish context listed on the stock exchange, but probably more liable for the larger European. They are the companies that are in scope, and in reality, they probably represent a small percentage of all the companies that exist in Ireland. And I suppose just the final layer is that there are Brexit and the UK, and so third countries will come into scope in 2028. And if they have consolidated sales in the Irish or an EU basket of companies, they will have to comply with CSRD. And if they have a single branch in an EU member country where the sales are in excess of 40 million, those companies will have to submit a CSRD compliant report. I suppose it's the next area where I think is going to be of greater interest and important in an Irish context, which is the supply chain. So most SMEs in Ireland will fall out of scope of CSRD. However, the pressure will be from that larger client customer, which probably represents a huge amount of where SMEs, both from the multinational perspective, be it pharma or tech, but food manufacturing, etc. And there will be definitely a huge pressure on the larger company on the supply chain to produce the data. So we're already seeing companies that would typically not be in scope having to react and prepare for the decisions that the bigger companies are looking. And there's anecdotal evidence, for example, coming out of the UK, while Tesco in the UK are not CSRD compliant because they're outside of the EU, they are working through the UK standards. They've already, over the last 2 years, been issuing surveys and questionnaires to their supply chain, asking them, have you got data reporting? Have you got a plan to show how you're going to improve it year on year? And if companies are failing to respond with, yes, this is our plan, a lot of companies are getting delisted. So while the legislation will be a fixed penalty, the pressure from commercial companies on the supply chain, I think, will be where a lot of the pressure will apply. Also, from an SME point of view, a lot of companies, while they might be in scope, we're noticing even within the AuxiliaGroup in terms of our tendering process, we're seeing the percentage of marks allocated to a clear sustainability policy increasing from 2 or 3% 2 or 3 years ago to some tenders up as high as 10% of the value of a tender is being allocated to sustainability. And we've no doubt we're going to start seeing greater pressure to demonstrate. And there are current tenders now from some obvious semi-states that are in the environmental sector looking for much more accurate data around what policies the companies that are applying for tenders have. So, and final, there is an ever changing landscape within CSRD. It's brand new. It was only signed off at EU levels in late 2022. Every 6 months, there is consultation because the EU really want this to work. So they're factoring in initial pushback from companies around the legislation is too much, is too much cost. So the recent signed off CSRD built into that legislation is a legislative requirement for the larger company to support the smaller company and to be able to provide platforms and ability for the smaller company who wouldn't have the resource to comply with all that we've just heard from Ingrid, but we need to support them in that journey. So I suppose in terms of questions, we're probably a little bit over time. In terms of the Q&A, we have a couple of questions and probably some more that are going to be a little bit more complicated to answer. So I'm going to answer or read out a couple of questions and maybe open it out to either Chloe or Ingrid. The first one probably is an Ingrid question, and just around the issue of how we incorporate CSRD reports into financial reports. And I suppose the initial legislation is indicating that the CSRD is a standalone report, and then the financial reporting that we're all used to will continue. There will be, I am assuming at some point, a convergence of the CSRD report to align itself with the financial. But Ingrid, currently, if the companies who are in scope this year are producing a report next year, are they required to consolidate them, or will the EU accept, here's my financial report and here's my CSRD report?
Yeah, and I think practicalities absolutely apply here. So it's going to be separate at the moment because even the EU isn't ready with their ESMA platform. They're still developing it to be able to upload reports. So initially there'll be separate reports, but in time, and I believe 2028 is kind of the timeline I have in my head, because by then all the 3 different phases that were put in place will have been complied with. And so by 2028, I believe that there has to be one integrated report. So the financial statements we currently have, the management accounts, all of that will need to map with the other. So we're going to get one integrated big report. And I don't know the answer, the final or the defined answer yet, but I believe it'll be between 2028 and 2030 that all companies will have to supply their information together.
Okay, thanks for Ingrid. Another question, maybe not as technical, but I suppose in terms of Chloe had outlined the B Corp approach and how it gets commercial businesses to make a big change. And so B Corp is very much aligned to commercial organizations. But I suppose CSRD is a set of regulations that are not necessarily business focused, it's organizational focused. So one of the questions is it possible that charities and companies limited by a guarantee will also be in scope as a large company, such as a hospital or a large-scale charity? My initial answer is yes, but Ingrid, you might have a little bit more insight than I am, but I know we're already talking to a number of private hospital chains that are now assessing the whole impact of ESG, double materiality, and indeed their reporting.
Yeah, and it probably depends on how they have been incorporated, really, because so every EU member state has to transpose it into law by the 6th of July. Right, and Ireland is in the process of has had a consultation, and what I believe to be the case is that, for example, credit unions and friendly societies, which are the charities, for example, they are out of scope. However, they may choose to follow CSRD because, again, they're probably in the chain somewhere. They're a customer to somebody else who will ask them for that data. And we've been working together with a huge organization here in Ireland who does not need to comply with CSRD for those reasons, but actually is following the rules and regulation, and even really is deep diving into the ESG data, because they're saying not only are we going to lead, but at the same time, we know that at a point in time, we will need to supply this information to somebody, even though we don't have to. We need to, either we're a customer to somebody or a supplier to somebody else. So while there's 50,000 of companies in total that are going to be in scope, it's millions of companies who are going to get some shape or form the ask of, show me your water data, show me your GHG data, how did you improve? And again, therefore, the B Corp, I suppose, and GRI and the SBTI, the voluntary standards that all focus on specific elements or, to improve, are really good at, showing them the journey of what to do. But ultimately, the CSRD, and don't forget, the CSRD is about reporting. CSDDD is more about the plans, so the mitigation plans, the remediation plans. CSRD is show me your data and your narrative, your policies, your processes, your action plans, your targets and your metrics. Show me where you are and show me what you're going to do. So you need to report, and that is different than, let's all get together and improve. That's absolutely the right thing to do. But CSRD is all about flatten it out across Europe. We want to see your company against this company at the same level with the same data. So they're building a huge EU database of sustainability data points so that they can actually say, that sector needs to improve, we might put funding in there. And again, same with the EU taxonomy. It's all about sustainability activities. So in Ireland, long story short, in Ireland, every EU member state transposes into law. And so they have some exceptions and some elements that they can provide. So here in Ireland, I believe that the credit unions and the charities and non-for-profits are out of scope, but they might well choose to be in scope because they're going to get questions.
Okay. I've a few more questions, but we've probably ran out of time, so I will summarize and circulate. Ingrid, thank you so much for that. Chloe, thank you so much. My last closeout is probably a more direct reach out to the AuxiliaGroup associate group. So Ingrid and Chloe, once again, thank you so much. And I think we can all appreciate it is a fairly transformative and significant change that a lot of companies are currently grappling with. And I suppose that's where we hope that within the AuxiliaGroup and our base of associates, we're going to help make some of those solutions. So to conclude, I suppose we're approaching the end of the webinar. And I want to just talk about the AuxiliaGroup and the associates. And you, the associates, are the people that deliver the solutions to our clients. There's an open invitation from me. If you want to know anything more about sustainability, ESG, the frameworks, our strategic alliance with B Corp and Future Planet, I'm here to try and help navigate that. You know what we do. We do the whole interim and contract placement. We do project management and consultancy. We do the HR and people, and we do the specialist recruitment. And what I've been saying to any of associates that I've met recently is we are all in the sustainability space. It's not going to be, oh, by the way, I add this on to my list of skills and tasks. I think over the coming 6, 8, 18 months, I think most consultants will be asked the question, in what you're helping us what is the framework? What is the lens? How does what we're doing align with an ESG framework? So a lot of us by default, given our experience and expertise, we've been working in sustainability, even though we mightn't have a badge to put on our lapel to say we have. I suppose in terms of what we do, you know what we do, how we do it through you, through experienced and trusted people. And I suppose as you all are working with clients, with the network of contacts, either on projects or consultancy, I suppose I ask the question and I look for the favor. If people are asking you, not just around sustainability, but specifically we're here talking about it, the Auxilia Group now have the beginnings of a very good set of tools and solutions to help companies navigate their way through this great transformation divide. The Auxilia Group Associate Referral Scheme is firmly in place. So for all associates out there, if you want to help yourself, to help us with some collateral around the Auxilia Group and what we do. I suppose my last and general ongoing call out to all your associates, some whom I've met and others I hope I will over the coming short while. If you, where you're working with a client or your network, need support with any of the opportunities we've talked about and outside of them, please refer us into the Auxilia Group. We have a great network of support through you, the associates. And I suppose if we're all helping each other, we can all help each other. So thank you all for here. Thank you in the future as you're looking at this over a Saturday breakfast or any other time of the day. Just one final thank you is a thank you to Anna Lee. You can't see her shoes to my left. She's the kind of behind the scenes guru and has helped me kind of shape everything together. So look, that's the end of the seminar. Bye for now. I hope to meet you all in the not too distant future and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you much. Bye.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.